All right, Facebook Live. Here we are once again, coming to you from the Great White North. Our Christian Minson here for Rythmia's Friday edition of Facebook Live, Breathwork edition. Here I am, just waiting for people to show up. As always, if you are tuning into the recording, jump to about 4 minutes in and you'll skip all of the introduction. Otherwise, here we go. People are joining. Stasia, Lynn, welcome. Glenn J. Adams, welcome. Today, I'm not at Rythmia. I'm visiting in Montreal, Canada. So a big shout out to our Canadian contingency. I know we have a lot of Canadians out there, and especially this time of year, starting about November through April, we get the snowbirds down to Rythmia, and for some reason I chose to come up here, and it is cold and it is snowy, but I'm enjoying it. I got to see my aunt, got to see my cousin. For those of you who don't know, I am half Canadian. So when things hit the, what we call it, the wastebasket in the United States, I can go north. But as somebody said once, if we all run away because things are difficult, then the USA is going to be left be full of people who aren't caring, and then that's going to be a worse situation anyway. So welcome to everybody joining on. Subda, hey, Claudia, Sydney. Anyway, we're just getting started here. We're just waiting a few minutes. If you want to type in where you're from, say hi to me. Get used to working your thumbs ups and your hearts, all that kind of stuff. This is an interactive type of forum. What I love is that we have the chat bar, and you can, and you've got those things so you can give me real-time feedback, ask real-time questions, all this kind of stuff. All right, we got some people using their buttons today. Good. I'm going to wait to about 1 more minute and we'll get started. That's what I like to see. Some interactive hearts, some interactive thumbs ups. Nobody's told me where you're coming in from today. Everybody that's shown up on the list so far, I recognize. I don't know why sometimes it tells you that some people have joined, and but you know, for me, it says about 6 people have joined, but in the room itself, there's about 30 people here now. We're just waiting 10 more seconds, I'd say. I always like to start about 4 minutes in to give enough people time to join on. And here we go. All right, so officially, welcome everybody. Our Christian Minson here, talking to you today about simplicity, live simply, live happy. All right, and now I've got a burst of hearts and thumbs ups and smiley faces and all that. There's always one meanie face that, oh, there it goes too. I'd love to know who sends those. And but anyway, I am here. I'm not at Rythmia today, but this is for Rythmia. I am the breathwork director at Rythmia, do all sorts of extra duties around there, but I'm a breathwork facilitator for 12 years, a monk, formerly a meditative monk for 10 years before that. I was a speaker. I am a speaker and author, and currently host of the Friday edition of Facebook Live, which is the breathwork edition. And now we got the faucet turned on because all hearts and likes are flowing in abundance. That's what I like to see. All right. Making me happy, making me feel like somebody's out there listening. And besides that, of course, you can type in the chat bar. So I mentioned at the beginning, but I'm not at Rythmia this week. I had to come to the United States to do some legal paperwork so that I could get my full-on work visa. So for those of you who don't know, I just passed the year mark at Rythmia earlier in this month. I've been here a year and now plan to be on at least another year. And so that requires some legal documentation that probably was required before, but we won't talk about that, right? But so I'm here, and then I'm visiting friends and family in Canada before I go back to the United States, to Colorado, visit my mother and father, and then pick up my documentation so that I can come back to Rythmia for the last couple weeks in December, close it out just before Christmas time, and start 2019 strong. We got to start thinking of all those resolutions and stuff. Anyway, so today's topic, live simply, live happy. And simplicity is one of my favorite topics, primarily as when I was a monk back in 20 to 10 years ago. Simplicity was one of our vows, one of our 4 vows we took. And why is simplicity important? Well, think about your life right now. Think about all the complexity that's in it. And, I dare say that all the stress, all the worry, all of the things that wear on you on a day-to-day basis, in a large part, if not exclusively, come from those things that just add to the complexity of your life. And I would even venture to say that probably a lot of that isn't even necessary in your life. And that's why we're talking about simplicity here today. How can we align ourselves with a life that's going to be simple, because that leads to happiness, that leads to true contentment. And how can we let go of all those extra stuff, and how do we know the difference, basically? Another thing that the complexity in our life does is it distracts us from our life's focus and our life's purpose. And this is especially vital because we can spend our entire life going down different avenues that maybe seem important in the moment, but in the end, when we start to look back, we say, what was that all about? Why did I spend my time focusing all this stuff when it doesn't really matter here now at the end of the road? So let's try to avoid that syndrome. That they say that people at the end of life, their biggest regret is that they didn't focus enough on what truly mattered to them, and they spent their time building wealth and building a career and getting all the things that they thought were supposed to be part of life. And in the end, it's like, what do you have to show for it? You can't take it with you. And the thing, especially the thing that makes life truly valuable is our relationships with others, of course, our relationship with ourself, and our relationship ultimately with our creator, or that source of life itself. So Scott's chiming in. Hello from Canada. Hey, I'm in Canada too. So where are you, Scott? Specifically, I'm in Montreal, or just outside of there. So I mentioned in the beginning that I took a vow of simplicity in the monastic order. And this was specifically, in this order, we specifically denoted simplicity as opposed to poverty. There's some orders that take a vow of poverty. And Paramahansa Yogananda, who was the one who set up the monastic order that I was part of, an Indian sage who came to America in the 1920s, he specifically wanted to say that, that life is abundant. Life is, and the spiritual life certainly should be no less abundant. There, to be amidst abundance is not, it is a very spiritual principle. It's not spiritual to have to let go of everything and live like a poor person. But he did say that simplicity was the essence of the theme here, which is ultimately, in a nutshell, being content with what you have. Right? So simplicity isn't about having or not having. It's about being content whether you have or whether you don't have. It's about, one day when Yogananda would talk, he talked about he'd go back to India, and as he became more famous, when he went to India, one night he might be invited to the house of the Raja of one province of India, the king essentially of that province, and he'd be invited to the palace, and he'd be served a 12-course meal, and he'd be wined and dined, and he'd be shown a room that had the finest linens and a large bed and marble floors and all this kind of stuff, the finest that life had. And he would graciously accept that. The next day, he might be out traveling and wind up in a village in one of the more remote parts of India, where all they had was a straw hut with not even a mat, but straw laid out on the dirt floor as their finest offering. And that's what was given to him in a very simple meal of maybe rice and dal being like a lentil type of stew. And still he graciously would accept that and be just as content. So this idea of simplicity is not to say, oh, well, I'm a monk, I can't accept the palace and all this because that's way above my pay grade, so to speak. And of course, I'm not talking about just monks, but all of us in general, that what's offered, if it's there, if it's ours to have, that we enjoy what we have, but we don't let it run our lives, so that when we don't have it, then all we're doing is pining away about, I should have this, or I need this to be happy, or that. But being content right where you are with what you have. All right, now some people are joining in. We're neighbors. All right, Ontario, great. Gord, Martin, hope you enjoyed Montreal. Thanks. Scott, Niagara region. Yeah, everybody's from this northern part. Now we've got a California, Orange County, Lindsay, Rythmia for reservations. Great. Rythmia's got some notes if you want to make reservations. Normally I have the reservation number in the background. It's now in the chat bar. And to see all our Facebook Live programs, you can go to rythmia.com. I don't know how to tell you the truth, I don't know how you get on the Facebook Lives from rythmia.com, but go there anyway. But if you want to see the Facebook Lives here on Facebook in the video section, or on YouTube, we've got videos archived in Rythmia's YouTube page. All right, so back to the topic at hand. So this is really what simplicity is. This idea of being content no matter where you are, no matter what you have. And you could have a lot, you could have a little, and ultimately sometimes even the having of a lot gets a little bit more tricky than having a little. I'm not here to profess any particular type of religion and all that, but in the Bible, Christ said something like, it's easier to pass a camel through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And what I understand that to mean, one, the eye of a needle was a pass which was a very precarious pass somewhere in that Middle Eastern region. So it was very hard. It's not like actually putting a camel to an eye of a needle, sewing needle, but to get a camel over that pass, it was more difficult for a rich man to get into heaven, meaning that there were so many distractions, so many things that a man of wealth focused on as a priority to his spiritual development, to his spiritual life, that when it comes to the end of life, just like I was saying in the beginning, you look back and see that, oh, the things, my efforts, my priorities were ill placed, and now I have nothing to show for it as I'm moving, as I have to let go of everything in this life. So, hello from Israel. Hi from Newberry. All right, lots of coming in February, March. Good, Doreen. Love to hear that. So, how do we approach life from a simple fashion? And I like to say, some simple points, basically. One is to look for energy leaks in your life. Energy leaks take the form of people, places, and things, right? The people, places, and things that are sucking your energy out, that are taking up your energy, complexifying your life so that you don't have enough energy, or you're not spending your energy wisely in those things that really matter to you. So, people, of course, energy vampires, really have to be vigilant. And what this would take is to take an assessment of the people in your life. And sometimes this is a little bit of a hard thing to do, because it's like, is this person really serving my happiness? Are they making my life easier, or are they making my life harder? And that doesn't mean you should be looking for people who are just serving you and how to so you don't have to do things, but really looking at is, am I spending undue time? I've had many relationships in my life, for instance, where we spent more time processing our relationship than we did actually living the relationship. And why was that? Because the relationship itself, I'll take at least partial responsibility, but sometimes you get matched up with a person that's sort of an energy vampire, or somebody who, in that relationship, you're sucked into a lot of excess dealing with that relationship, and it drains you from being able to stay focused on what's truly important in your life. Now, if a relationship is truly important, of course, it takes time to develop, and it takes time and focus on that relationship. But I've been enough to know that there's relationships can go smoother if a person is not an energy vampire, that you can you still have to put in the work, but it's relatively smoother in contrast to when you're with somebody who just keeps sucking your time, sucking your energy away, that you really feel drained. You really feel like nothing's it's not working, no matter how much you put into it. And this is, these are relationships, your personal relationships, your family relationships, your work relationships, across the board, to just take an assessment of all the people that are in your life and find out, where you feel that you stand with them. Then you got to make the hard choice. Do I, keep this relationship, or don't I? And sometimes you don't have a choice, but you could have a choice to minimize the interactions. And this is the way to strategize this, to minimize the interactions with people that are taking from you, and to put your energy into those relationships that have a reciprocal energy exchange. So ones that are feeding you as well as you feeding them. So that so that's the people, places, your environment is the environments that you hang out in are extremely important to this concept of living contently, living simply. Yogananda, who I mentioned when I was talking about being a monk, used to say that environment is stronger than willpower, meaning that not that our will, just to be clear, is our strongest entity, the thing that's going to help us to achieve great things in our lives. But when he made this comment, environment is stronger than willpower, it's really to say that our will, is our strongest asset, but it can be influenced. And if you're, they say like a rock can be worn away by a drop of water that continually drops on that rock for thousands of years. So eventually the environment of that rock was in is stronger than its will to be there. And rocks, if you would say, have a will, a very enduring will. It's, it takes a lot to eradicate a rock. But, another way to look at it would be if you're in say you don't drink coffee and you go to a work environment where everybody's drinking coffee. So every time you go to the break room, everybody's there with their cups of coffee. They've got pots brewing, filling it up. And you're like, no, thank you for some time. But eventually, if you stay in that environment long enough, the likelihood that you'll end up drinking coffee, even though you didn't feel it was in your best interest to begin with, is very high. It's very high that you might, go along with the crowd, so to speak. If you can't beat them, join them, as they say. And so this, so these environments you really want to assess, once again, just like the people, is this environment really adding to my happiness, or is it taking away? Is it adding more complexity to my life? And we've got our home environments, our work environments, our social environments. Probably the ones we have the most control over is our social environments. And that might be where you want to look at first. Then your work environment, within the context of any environment, you might go into sub-environments. So if, an example of that coffee example, if you're finding that the life is becoming more complex because you're hanging out with people in the break room, you might avoid the break room, right? So you stay in a different zone of that environment. At home, your home environment, maybe assessing where you live, this one becomes a little bit more difficult sometimes. You're tied down to where you live for various reasons, your job, your family, your external family, and all that's there. But this is where the assessment really takes place, the introspection to see, is this environment really adding to my happiness, or would there be a place that could be better, where I could live a little more simply? If you're in the middle of the city, that often is a little bit more complex versus out in the country. However, the city also tends to offer more resources and things. You can just walk to the grocery store or things like that. Whereas the country, maybe you have to drive 30 minutes before you even get to a store. And so that requires a different assessment of resources and all that. So there's no right answer. I mean, there's no one answer that would apply to everybody, but based on your needs, your abilities, your situation, you want to assess all of those. All right, let's see what. Hi, Christian on Simplicity. I just observed a homeless man eating a sandwich from a trash can. I observed my reaction to this and strangely felt a pang of envy, and that I have so much to do and worry about. in this life, and this homeless man, in a way, does whatever he wants to do. It's an interesting look at it, and that, I mean, I don't know that I'd want to trade places, but it's a good wake-up call there when you see somebody who is so little, and in a lot of ways, this guy's focus is just the immediate task in front of him. But this is a good example of simplicity over poverty, because I would say that in many ways, maybe this guy the homeless person doesn't get to do whatever he wants to do, because he doesn't have a certain baseline of resources. Like, his life is devoted to finding food, finding shelter, finding some form of entertainment when he's got food and shelter. But maybe he wants an education, maybe he wants a family, maybe he wants, things like that, and isn't able to get them because he's living a more impoverished life than necessarily a simple life. So I'm not saying that I think what you're saying here, to have this pang of envy, is not a bad thing. What it's doing is awakening you to the idea, this whole idea of simplicity versus complexity. Where in my life am I so complex that I don't even get to focus on the basics of life? So, Claudia, I think the homeless man is what he has to do, not what he wants. Yeah, that's what I just said. How about that? The homeless man is living far from a simple life. Oh, good. People are saying this stuff. You're on the same page. I heard something from Mooj. He said, to be happy, we need nothing. To be sad, we need something. That's a great thing. Happiness, true happiness is an internal experience. True sadness usually is stimulated by something that then we either have and don't like, or liked but now don't have. And great quote there, Randy. Marie, February 23rd, is that when you're coming? And Stasia, simple life is a rich life. It can be, and that's what we're really focusing on especially when I distinguish between simplicity versus poverty, right? So if we're really, which gets me into the next part of my topic, simplicity. And Claudia's saying, yeah, simplicity versus necessity. Yeah, that's a great way to distinguish when we're talking about the homeless guy. But a simple life is a rich life. It can be, or it can't be. But where I think it is leads to the next step of how to live a simple life, and that's to prioritize. Prioritize the things, the people, the situations that bring happiness to your life, that bring contentment to your life. You want to prioritize those things, meaning put them at the top of your list and make sure that you're spending adequate time and energy with those people and with those activities, versus finding yourself without priorities, and then often your energy gets sucked every which way by people who are strong-willed and direct your energy that way, by situations usually non-important but very urgent situations that distract you to focus on them instead of your important activities in life. So one of the ways to do this is maybe old-fashioned at this point in time, but to develop a mission statement. I came up with a mission recently, the past few months, that to say I came up with it, it finally dawned on me what my true mission in life is, and that is to love people. Dun, da, da, da. Wow, that's a big revelation, huh? But when you put your mission at the top of the page, so now my mission is to love people. It's not like I said, not like a big revelation or wow, but what it is clarity. It's clarity that everything that I do serves that mission, right? So if it's like go to the mall and spend lots of money, or go to the homeless shelter and serve soup in the soup line for a couple hours, I might choose that homeless shelter over going shopping for myself, because that one serves my mission more. I'm clear that my mission is to love people. However, let's say going to the mall was to get Christmas presents for all the loving people in the people I love in my life. Then that one might be a top priority, because again, I'm doing something to serve my mission statement. The point I was making there is, again, going to the mall isn't necessarily good or necessarily bad, but does what your activity is, or the people you're hanging out with, or the situations you find yourself in, reflecting service to your highest priorities. And your priorities come physical priorities, emotional priorities, and spiritual priorities. All right, so you want to make sure you're prioritizing your lives in these three dimensions. Love your mission, love your clarity. Thanks, Carolyn. And it's really helped me. Again, nothing that is really ultra profound, but it is profound. One, in its simplicity, and two, in its clarity. And perhaps that's the biggest thing that prioritizing does, is it gives us clarity as to what's most important in your life. And simplicity is really about serving those things that are most important to you, and letting go of those things that don't necessarily serve your higher purposes. We can't do it all. Some people might disagree with me, but let's just say my life experience has been, I can't do it all. And there's really, I don't know, in business, there's 4 quadrants of activity. Important, but not urgent. Important, but urgent. Not important and not urgent. And not important, but urgent. And what, we really want to be serving those things that are important. And of course, if it's important and urgent, we usually got to get around to it. But often the important but not urgent things, like developing your mission statement, or spending more time with the family, is important but not immediately urgent as it is to pay your bills on time, and things like that. Then there's not important but not urgent things, are not important but urgent activities, like applying for Publishers Clearinghouse contest to win $1 million, right? Virtually worthless, but we're like, oh, I've got to do that because the deadline's tomorrow. And so you end up paying, wasting your time applying for that, or sending in your entry, when you could have been spending it doing an important but not necessarily urgent thing there. Again, as a basic example. So prioritizing your spiritual priorities basically are a priority to stay in spiritual alignment, to recognize what I'd say is your spiritual priorities are to help you remember that you're primarily a spiritual being, having a physical experience, not a physical being, sometimes being able to have spirit experiences once in a while. Like, oh, I'll meditate once every other week or something like that, as a way to get me connected. But really recognizing that we want to cultivate our understanding that we're there's much greater dimension to who we are than just our physicality. So to prioritize this, any kind of activity that brings us in recognition or communion with that. Meditation, of course, is one of the hugest ones, but yoga, prayer, walk in the woods, breath work. Breath work is a huge thing. Studying the lives or the words of saints, all that kind of stuff. So emotional priorities then is to primarily prioritize the people in your life. And I think we talked about this a little bit, but really finding those people that are most significant in your life, which are often the people that you spend the most time with. So first places to look are your family and your work environments, right? So these people, in some ways, they don't come to you by choice. They just are. And I know from my own experience that even if you don't necessarily, you wouldn't have chose these people to either be in your family or be in your work life, but you're with them. If you don't spend some time cultivating those relationships, then it just gets, life just gets more complex. You end up having to put out fires of problems and conflicts and things like that, if you just spent a little time prioritizing those relationships, and of course you want to invest time in those relationships that truly do bring you the happiness, that truly have a bearing on your contentment in life. And what Marilyn's saying, laughing is huge. So yeah, prioritize time to laugh, time to enjoy. Then we've got the physical priorities. And this would be exercise, diet, those kinds of things. Life, maybe you're saying, well, those are the things that are making my life more complex. But I can tell you, if you know anybody out there who has physical problems because they haven't taken care of their back, or they haven't eaten well, and now they've got diabetes or things like that, talk about complexifying your life. If we don't take care of this physical vehicle, it's going to make us take care of it, and then oftentimes that's too late, and then we're playing this maintenance routine, which takes up more time and energy than if we just devoted in advance time to keeping it at least at a minimal health. And family is a spiritual practice. Amen to that. So in more ways than one, too. Let's see. So, there was a book out there, I think it was called Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And then the subtitle was basically, and it's all small stuff. I don't know if that was the title of the book or that was the main message, but that's essentially it, that that we start to recognize that there's very little or almost nothing that really is so important that we have to complexify our lives to deal with it. We can when we put that all in perspective and look at is it really important, then oftentimes, I'd say 9 times out of 10, we can often let these things go. And again, work on our priorities, have that mission, recognize that on the emotional, physical, and spiritual planes that we want to just keep those in balance. And life is simple, life is happy. More ways than one is true. The opportunity and awakening. Yeah, that's as far as family being a spiritual path. And so the kind of the final point that I want to make in all this is how we can keep life simple is dun, 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 breath work. In my talks every week, this really, breathwork is a tool that I've been teaching and practicing for the last 12 years. And if we add on my monastic years where our meditation practices were really modified breathing techniques, I've been 20 plus years at it, and finding how much working with the breath can have a ripple effect in our lives. I subscribe to what I call a holographic viewpoint, a holographic view of our life in relationship to our environment. And that means that any small part of our experience can give us clues as to the larger part of our experience. So this I definitely subscribe to when we're talking about breath work, that the way that we breathe, the way that we work with our breath, can give us clues as to how the greater context of our life is going. And it can also help, not only can it give us clues, but then it can be a tool to help us change those things. And in the breath work that we practice at Rythmia and that I teach, there's three basic elements. We want the breath to be full, we want the breath to be free, and we want the breath to be fluid or flowing. And when we're talking in terms of simplicity, we can really focus on the last two, especially the freedom of the breath and the fluidity. And the freedom means to relax with each exhale that we take, and ultimately relax in the whole breath pattern. So that as we let go and we remind ourselves with each exhale we take, and we take about 17,000 each day, that we start to set up a habit of, if you could relax just with each exhale that you took, then that sets up this habit pattern to relax in all of the exhales of your day. And so if we're practicing the relaxing of the exhale during breathwork sessions, is what I'm saying. It sets us up for starting to relax during every exhale, which then spills over into our lives. And as things come and hit us, or make us tense or make us less than relaxed, we are already in this habit of staying more relaxed. And then the flow part, where we're really working in this breath pattern to keep the breath fluid and moving, and in this graceful rhythmic fashion. And again, that if we find, I often say, as your breath flows, so your life flows. So think, if you're taking these stilted, erratic breaths, or holding your breath, or breathing rapidly and shallow, look at how your life is going. And I would say that there's a direct reflection that your life is, not moving very smoothly, very fluidly. That your life may be shallow, and even though you're doing a lot of things, you're not feeling very satisfied. So that once again, as we get into breathing this fluid flowing pattern, that starts to ripple out into the activities of our life to make them more fluid and flowing. That doesn't mean that we're not going to have challenges in your life. Okay, so just by breathing fluidly, all of a sudden all your problems and challenges go away. What it means is that as challenges come into your life, instead of feeling like you just hit a brick wall and now now life is difficult and cumbersome, it's like you meet that challenge with that attitude of fluidity, with that attitude of ease and grace. And it's like you look for the natural solutions. You don't let it just stop you in your tracks, but find out how can you continue to flow like a river. A river flows downstream, meets a rock. It doesn't get stopped by the rock. It finds a way to flow around that rock. And, again, observing these things in nature sometimes brings us to greater epiphanies about the way that our life can move. And that's a lot of of what happens too at Rythmia as people go through their medicine ceremonies and such. They recognize these concepts as they observe something that happens in their life, or they observe something in nature. All of a sudden, they make a correlation, and there's an aha. So Marilyn Kurtz, 20 plus years as well. Beautiful. As far as dealing with your breath, and so are we going to do a breath session here today? No, we are not. I'm looking forward to seeing you on December 16th. Excellent, Kathleen. Breathing fix. More ways than one. It's true. Yeah. Okay. So as far as doing a breath session, I'm not going to do one here today. I will give you a little homework and a little challenge to go back into some of the Facebook Lives, or you can go onto the Rythmia YouTube page and find some of the prior Facebook Lives I've done. And in there's some that talk about breath work. I think there's one, the three elements to transformation. I believe that then I talk specifically about the full, the free, and the flow, and then actually replicate or give an example of the breath work, so you can go back and do that. And of course, my biggest invitation is to come to Rythmia and get yourself a full-on experience of what it is to work with the breath, and especially this profound technique where you'll meet me, you'll meet our staff of highly trained and highly compassionate folks, and help you on your way to not only living a simpler and happier life, but to achieving a miracle in your life. So let's see. As I'm reaching in, let's just see any comments. That's awesome. Love your philosophy and clarity. Can't wait to book my stay. Excellent, Maura. And if you do, certainly look me up when you're here, or next time you're on. Let me know that you booked it, and come say hi when you are at Rythmia. Maritza, all right. Thanks, Christian. Beautiful. And one day soon. Beautiful. And that's, I think, in response to getting out here to Rythmia. A couple of people just joined on. Sorry to say that you're joining on just at the end of the road here for at least this Facebook Live. If you do have any other questions or such, I got a couple minutes left. Again, the topic today has been live simply and live happily. Remember that the simplicity goes a long way to making life a little bit happier. And you may know that, but we talked about the ways to do that. To prioritize in your life really those things that are most important, to include the physical, emotional, spiritual dimensions of your being, to employ things like breath work to help you stay on track and keep you in that clarity. And let's see, any more things. Sure will. Love you and thank you. Oh, thank you. And see you next year at Rythmia. Good, Lauren. Hopefully that's next year, like in January versus next year, next December. Awesome. So I guess the last thing I'll say, if any more comments do not come up, is feel free to friend me on Facebook if you want to keep up the conversation outside of these Facebook Lives. My name is R. Christian Minson, the letter R. Christian Minson on Facebook, and you can send me a friend request. If you do that, just remember to always send a message along with that. Message me on Facebook that says, "Hey, I saw you on this Facebook Live, and I want to keep the conversation alive," or whatever you want to say. Great job, or I like this particular thing. Or if you got topics you need to talk about, I'd love to hear that and try to incorporate them in some way. So, but it's vitally important that you send me a message. Otherwise, it's likely that I won't get around to accepting that friend request until I find out who you really are. If you have erratic breathing that correlates to your life and what's going on, Laura, yes, exactly. And that's exactly what I've been saying is, as your breath flows, so your life flows. So if you're breathing erratically, look at your life and see how I would put money on it that there's erratic elements to your life, and that the great news is that breathwork reveals this, but then as we reverse engineer things, the breathwork can actually take care of that. Meaning if you're breathing erratically, you're sending waves of erraticness into your life, and as a result, you're living erratically. But as you start to practice a harmonious style of breathing, which is what we teach at Rythmia, what I've been teaching for the last 12 years, that as you breathe more fully, more freely, and in a fluid fashion, that will start to alter the way that you live your life. And it'll bring you first awareness of where you're breathing erratically, and awareness of how to change that. And then often even gives you good motivation to start changing those things. So can you spell your Facebook name again? I'll type it right here in Rythmia. It's going to be under Rythmia, but R. Christian, not Christina, Christin, R. Christian Minson. That's letter R, Christian, just like the religion, and Minson, Minson. Let's see. I missed the beginning. Yeah, that's all right, Lauren. Great questions. And let's see. Oh, John Scott joined. Hi there, John Scott. See you later. And awareness. Thank you. And there's mine. All right. So that brings us to close to the top of the hour and close to the end of this session of Facebook Live. Hopefully it's brought some enlightening understanding of how to live a little more simply and ultimately bring a little more happiness into your life. I'm R. Christian Minson signing off for this week. Until next time, namaste.